On this Tuesday night, the fate of people hiding in a bombed-out steel plant. Who was able to emerge after 2 months underground?
It was a risk.
Where are they now, and what about the others still trapped? Plus, some Ukrainians returning home to nothing. Diverting disaster.
Just too much water too fast.
The race to save homes in southern Manitoba. Stifling conditions, the extreme weather smothering India and Pakistan. And after being penalized by the pandemic,
this is the first time back to normal.
The much-needed shot for bars, pubs, and restaurants.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. We begin with what's happening at that steel plant in Mariupol, Ukraine, where hundreds of people have been sheltering. It's believed about 100 people, including women and children, got out on Sunday with the help of the International Red Cross and the UN. But they have yet to arrive at an agreed-to reception center in Ukraine. And Russian shelling of the steel plant began again just moments after the buses left. The fate of hundreds of other people still sheltered under the plant hang in the balance. Our coverage tonight begins with Redmond Shannon.
Freedom from Azovstal. This video was provided by a Ukrainian politician. It appears to show some of the people who clambered out from beneath Mariupol's surrounded steel plant over the weekend. We were trapped for 2 months, says this woman. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says so far around 100 civilians have been brought out in an operation supported by the United Nations and the Red Cross. At a village just outside Mariupol, some of the exhausted evacuees described the conditions they lived in since the start of the invasion. For a month, 40 of us were sharing just 6 tins of food a day, says this woman. We boiled that food in buckets. She says she first thought they'd only need to shelter below the steelworks for 2 or 3 days, not 2 months. An aide to the mayor of Mariupol says Russia resumed shelling the compound on Sunday after the first evacuation. The planned destination for the civilian convoy is Zaporizhia. On Monday, some civilians made it there from other parts of Mariupol by any means possible.
It was a risk, but they wanted to get from Mariupol, so we decided that it's worth it.
This woman says her uncle in Ukraine's armed forces is likely still inside Azovstal. The deputy commander of Azov Brigade, a group that first formed as ultra-nationalist Ukrainians opposing Russian forces, says around 20 children and hundreds of adult civilians are still inside. He says some are buried beneath rubble and many of his soldiers are injured or dead.
This evacuation effort covers only civilians and we still have Ukrainian defenders who, including wounded, severely wounded Ukrainian soldiers.
Possibly as many as 2,000 of them. If and when the last civilians get out, it seems doubtful Russia will show much mercy for the remaining soldiers. According to the Kremlin, some of them are from Canada. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
Russia has not stopped its attacks, but there is a new assessment of how weakened its forces are. The latest UK Ministry of Defence intelligence report says it believes Russia committed over 120 battalion tactical groups to the invasion, which is about 65% of its ground combat strength. The UK believes it's likely more than a quarter of those units have now been rendered combat ineffective. Some of Russia's elite units have suffered the most, including airborne forces. The UK believes it could take years for Russia to reconstitute those forces. There's widespread condemnation of what Russia's foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, said about Nazi leader Adolf Hitler having Jewish origins. Israeli Foreign Minister Yair Lapid called it an unforgivable, scandalous statement and a terrible historical mistake. Lavrov was asked on Italian TV why Russia claims it is denazifying Ukraine when President Volodymyr Zelensky is himself Jewish. Lavrov said Hitler also had Jewish blood. Germany's government calls that absurd propaganda.
The statement of Foreign Minister Lavrov is false, is despicable, and is deemed of the strongest condemnation. He's basically engaging in Holocaust inversion, making the victims of the Holocaust the perpetrators. and that is inexcusable.
And in his nightly address today, Ukrainian President Zelensky said Russia has forgotten all the lessons of World War II, or perhaps never learned them. Millions of Ukrainians have fled their homes because of Russia's invasion. Others have stayed to fight or have no safe way out. And in places now liberated from Russian control, people are trying to find a way to live again. Crystal Goomansingh met people in a village near Chernihiv, where nearly every home has been destroyed or damaged.
Even weeks after the fighting, the air these survivors breathe is still tainted with smoke. Homeless, traumatized, yet still open-hearted to strangers.
We spent 21 days in the basement. I saw a woman blown to pieces. She was in her kitchen cooking food while they targeted her house. I want to say that it was not easy to survive.
Across Ukraine, many elderly, immobile, and sick were forced to shelter in place when the full invasion began on February 24th. This northeast village is less than 100 kilometers from the Russian and Belarusian borders. Here, people endured aerial and ground assaults for roughly 5 weeks by invading forces. Olha Makarenko cries while explaining how in her lifetime she's lost 2 homes, first in the Chernobyl disaster and now in this war.
It was so hard to look at your own house burning, where I lived for 40 years.
Nearly every home here is in ruins. Villagers say during the Second World War, Nazis leveled their community. Now, Russians did the same.
The Russians are even worse than the Nazis.
This village, Novoselivka, was liberated by Ukrainian forces about a month ago. The damage is catastrophic, and people in this small village are going without. They are waiting for humanitarian aid, including temporary shelters. Occasional donations of food are provided by soldiers or Hare Krishnas. The group says they found places to sleep but don't expand on where or with whom. They come back daily to tend to their modest gardens, but they also come back because this is their home.
We are just waiting. I don't know where we can live. If no one will help us, we won't be able to rebuild our houses.
The war has caused the biggest humanitarian crisis in Europe in decades, a crisis these Ukrainians never imagined would leave them with nothing. Crystal Goomansingh, Global News, Novoselivka, Ukraine.
Members of the European Union could not agree today on exactly how to reduce their dependence on Russian energy. EU energy ministers held an emergency meeting to come up with a united response to Moscow's demand that foreign buyers pay for Russian gas in rubles or be cut off. Russia has already cut off supplies to Bulgaria and Poland after they refused to comply with its payment scheme. The European Energy Commissioner says that strengthened the EU's will to stop using Russian fossil fuels.
And it is an unjustified breach of existing contracts and a warning that any member state could be next.
Adri Simpson says the risk of energy shortages in Europe is low because there are alternative supplies, but putting them in place will take time. According to the Centre for Research on Energy and Clear Air Europe, EU countries have paid more than 45 billion euros to Russia for gas and oil since it invaded Ukraine on February 24th.
It's good to have you here. Thank you for coming.
Nancy Pelosi was in Poland today. The Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives met lawmakers and the Polish president. She and the delegation thanked the Polish people for opening their hearts and homes to Ukrainians. Poland has taken in more than 3 million refugees since the war began. Pelosi was in Kyiv on the weekend, meeting Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Now, to this country, in southern Manitoba, another weekend of heavy rain has forced evacuations in some areas because of flooding. Parts of the province have received 4 to 6 times the normal amount of precipitation this spring. Hardest hit right now is the Peguis First Nation, 180 kilometers north of Winnipeg. More than 1,000 people are under a mandatory evacuation order after ice jams on the Fisher River drove up water levels. Roads are awash and some 480 homes are surrounded by water. Residents were sent to hotels in nearby communities, including Selkirk, Gimli, and Winnipeg. Other parts of the province, including flood-prone areas near Winnipeg, have been preparing for what people feared was coming. Brittany Greenslade is near Carman, Manitoba tonight.
Donna, residents all along this rural road were forced out of their homes this weekend as rising floodwaters came fast. This ditch is now filled with more than a meter of water, cutting off access to some homes.
Just too much water too fast. It just absolutely could not, they just couldn't cope with it.
With such speed and volume, these homes in the regional municipality of Dufferin, about 85 kilometers southwest of Winnipeg, didn't stand a chance, each protected by dikes that couldn't keep the floodwaters out.
There's been some concerns over the years, but they've never been compromised like this. And now they got a swimming pool right in front of their yard.
Just down the street, this home is surrounded. The family is doing its best to sandbag. 200 volunteers were out sandbagging in the surrounding areas this weekend.
I know we picked up 20,000 sandbags yesterday from Winnipeg just to assist with the efforts.
Manitobans are no stranger to overland flooding, but may have avoided a worst-case scenario this time. Water in the diversion rose nearly a foot Sunday, according to the mayor, but it appears the situation is stabilizing.
The waters have gone down 6 inches overnight, and our diversion here is doing its job like it's supposed to. And it's saved Carman numerous times over the last 31 years.
A bit further south in Morden, which also remains under a local state of emergency, the focus is now on cleanup.
I count myself very lucky because the water didn't get into the garage and it didn't get into my basement. It was kind of scary. I have to tell you that I was a little stressed through the whole thing.
Across southern Manitoba, those floodwaters are slowly receding in many communities, but until all of that water's gone, it's hard to get a true picture of just how much damage has been done. Brittany Greenslade, Global News, near Carman, Manitoba.
Canada's electric vehicle industry has been given a boost thanks to an injection of public money. Stellantis announced it will spend $3.6 billion to retool its plants in Windsor and Brampton, Ontario, to produce electric vehicles. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said the project will help make Canada a global leader in electric vehicles.
It'll deliver for workers, it'll deliver for communities, it'll deliver for our economy, and it'll deliver for the environment.
The federal and Ontario governments are each providing more than $500 million to support the project. The sex assault trial for Canadian musician and Headley frontman Jacob Hogard got underway in a Toronto courtroom today after it was delayed multiple times because of the pandemic. The trial before a jury was requested by Hogard. The 34-year-old pleaded not guilty during a preliminary hearing in 2019 after he was charged in 2018 with 1 count of sexual interference and 2 counts of sexual assault causing bodily harm. Police allege the charges relate to 3 separate incidents with a woman and a teenager in 2016. The trial is expected to run until early June. Seeing orange coming up, the eerie phenomenon enveloping Iraq's capital. Plus, heat wave, the scorching hot weather suffocating India and Pakistan. A record-breaking heat wave has swept over India and Pakistan, putting the lives of millions of people at risk. The month of April was India's hottest in 122 years, maximum temperatures averaging more than 37 degrees. Last month, Delhi recorded 7 consecutive days over 40 degrees, and on Friday, southeastern Pakistan suffered a scorching 47 degrees. Climate scientists say what's worrying is not just how hot it is, but the extent and the duration of the heat wave. Eerie orange skies have again engulfed Iraq, blanketing the capital, Baghdad. Another choking dust storm settled over the capital streets on Sunday and again today, seeping into homes and grounding flights. Dozens of people have been taken to the hospital with respiratory issues. Experts warn the phenomenon is becoming more frequent because of drought and declining rainfall. Ahead, the first report from Nova Scotia's Mass Casualty Commission, why it brings little comfort to families. The inquiry into the mass shooting in Nova Scotia in 2020 released its interim report today. After 6 months of fact-finding and speaking with witnesses, it lays out how the Mass Casualty Commission is going about its work and defends its decision to limit witness testimony. But as Ross Lord reports, it doesn't advance the public's understanding of what happened and why.
When they reluctantly agreed to a public inquiry into the Portapique massacre, the federal and Nova Scotia governments ordered an interim report to keep the public apprised of their work. The Mass Casualty Commission has now filed its first formal report, which is heavy on process and short on what the inquiry has uncovered.
Some of that information has been shared before, but I think it's useful to bring it all together again so that individuals who are engaged with our work, who are watching our work, understand, where we are in the process.
Much of the 84-page report dwells on how the Commission is going about its work and how it will continue gathering evidence and hearing from witnesses. To those watching the inquiry closely, the theme of the report is not surprising, but the lawyer who represents the majority of victims' families says she and her clients are disappointed.
I don't think any of us expected there to be any sort of factual findings or conclusions drawn in this interim report, but that it is essentially silent on any of that is discouraging.
Along with in-person hearings, the Commission has released thousands of pages of documents, some detailing the RCMP's confusion as the gunman was killing 22 people. 3 separate callers to 911 tried to tell the Mounties the killer was dressed as one of them and was driving a replica RCMP vehicle. But he eluded authorities for 13 hours as officers struggled with technology and communication before police killed him after a chance encounter at a gas station. The interim report does include a reference to mental health in hard-hit communities, saying we encourage governmental and non-governmental agencies to provide the necessary mental health, trauma, and bereavement supports.
I expect it will be an area that we will see recommendations on in the final report once we have more information and had more opportunity to examine that a little further.
Upcoming witnesses include senior RCMP managers who've been criticized for not initiating an emergency alert to the public. The Mass Casualty Commission's final report, including lessons learned and recommendations, is due in November. Ross Lord, Global News, Halifax.
Pandemic recovery Canadian style. Next, how hockey is helping put bars back in business. Jeopardy fans are holding their breath. Canadian Matea Roach is going for her 20th win in a row tonight. Her family already knows what happens next, but they're keeping their lips sealed.
Well, I don't know how we would be able to maintain any composure whatsoever if we didn't know the end result, but we don't know a lot of detail about what happens in the game, so it's still extremely exciting.
That is Roach's mother, Patty McKinnon. She describes Matea as a private person, and her younger brother says knowing millions of viewers have watched the 23-year-old from Nova Scotia excel is remarkable.
I think that she is an incredible role model for young queer people, for young women, and just young people in general who are traditionally left out or not included in intellectual spaces. So I think that's really incredible that she can do that.
Matea is tied for the 6th longest Jeopardy run in history. She'll climb to 5th if she wins tonight. No matter what, though, she is already the quiz show's most successful Canadian player. If you're not a Jeopardy fan, there's still plenty of other excitement to look forward to. Round 1 of the NHL playoffs kicks off tonight. 3 Canadian teams are in the running for the Stanley Cup, and that is music to the ears of bars and restaurants. As Heather Urichs West reports, they're rooting for any team that gets a long and lucrative run.
3, 2, 1.
Oh, the Stanley Cup. It's what hockey fans fantasize about all year long. And right now, all that hope looms large.
I really hope they win this year because we've been waiting so many years, and I just really want them to win this year.
Waited a long time myself in Edmonton. I lived through the glory years as a child, so we're excited right now with hopefully the Cup coming back to Edmonton.
While only 3 of Canada's NHL teams made the playoffs this year, the Flames, the Oilers, and the Leafs all enter the first round with home ice advantage. And bar owners are ready to welcome the playoff crowds. It's been a long time.
Yeah, this is the first time back to normal, like back to feeling like a true playoff normal, like a normal run. The hospitality industry is still climbing out of 2 years of being closed, being open and closed.
On the street known in Calgary as the Red Mile, Flames and Oilers fans are welcome for now. Wins for both teams would mean a Battle of Alberta in the second round and a badly needed boom for business.
Just seeing all the other businesses, including ours, being able to finally get our legs back underneath us and rebuild. And then this is just we couldn't have asked for a better way to kickstart summer.
Of course, a packed house for a week or two in May won't erase the impacts of 2 years of COVID restrictions and closures. And there are new challenges for business owners as well. A shortage of labor, rising food costs and expenses. But if a Canadian team was able to make a lengthy run,
it's huge, right? The collective memory and collective mood is a thing, right?
It's just that much needed energy boost and that positivity that is needed right now.
A pandemic palate cleanser like only a magical playoff push can provide. So go Flames, go. Heather Yurex West, Global News, Calgary.
That is Global National for this Monday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Your Canada is the Morris Island Conservation Area near Arnprior, Ontario. Please email your photos for viewers at globalnational.com. And thanks for watching. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.